There have been 133 combat engagements along the entire front line since the beginning of the day. The most intense situation remains in the Pokrovsk sector. There, about 50 assaults have taken place. Our soldiers have been repelling attacks near 15 settlements. The Russian pressure is especially felt near Antonivka. This is another strategic city for the Russians. Fighting is still ongoing there, but 12 attacks have already been repelled. The enemy has attacked our positions nearby 8 times, near the Serebryansky forestry. The situation has also escalated in the area where the Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions meet. There have already been 17 clashes in this sector, but the assaults continue. The defense of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region is also ongoing. So far, 2 enemy attacks have been recorded there. There were 6 such attacks in the Orikhiv area. Russian military units that tried to approach our positions near the Antonivsky bridge have also been stopped. Meanwhile, the analytical resource Deep State reports that the Russians have advanced in several directions along the front. The enemy managed to capture new territories in Kupiansk and Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region. In Kupiansk, the occupiers reportedly managed to enter the central districts of the city from 2 sides at once. Street fighting is ongoing in the city. In Vovchansk, the Russians have also advanced several streets into the private sector. Putin's army is also having success in the Zaporizhzhia region near the village of Plavny, which is several dozen kilometers from the regional center. Let me remind you, there is still no official confirmation of this information. The soldiers of the 34th Separate Coastal Defense Brigade are defending the Kherson region. They are destroying the enemy, who are entrenched on the left bank of the Dnipro, using various means. Our correspondent Olha Chitailo saw how FPV drone operators work and in particular how they fly over the occupied Oleshki on the other side of the destroyed Antonivsky bridge. And so that our guys can destroy as many enemies as possible, let's support their fundraiser for the development of the brigade's unmanned systems. You can transfer money by scanning the QR code, which will be on the screen during the next segment.
Kozak, 3 minutes in the air.
Plus further Kozak. Oh.
Kalyun, we are just about to take off right now, very soon.
The drone crew of the 34th Separate Coastal Defense Brigade is preparing an FPV drone for a flight to the left bank of the Dnipro.
We are now turning on the essential equipment to successfully complete the flight. Mollo.
The drone flies over the river, and the Dhaka settlements of the left bank appear on the screen. People used to live here.
There is absolutely no sign of any life here at all.
Next is Oleshki. From what remains of it during the flight, not a single person can be seen. Only the skeletons of buildings.
Mostly it's just old people here. There are no young people here.
Russian soldiers have settled in many of the houses. We fly out onto the M14 highway, which starts on the right bank. On the left bank, the occupiers use it for military purposes.
Civilians don't travel here. This is already the highway, right here. We fly by a burned-out car once, a burned-out car twice. Is that your...
Are you doing?
Well, yes. Well, not exactly.
The soldiers say they're just patrolling for now, but when the battery runs out, they'll try to hit one of the known targets.
There are indeed pilots in every single house here, you see.
When the battery is low, the soldiers fly up to the depot with Russian equipment and hit one of the hangars. At the same time, you can see a stream from another drone on the screen. It's tracking a Russian soldier who is slowly walking somewhere.
The drone is flying really high, he can't hear it. They're about to go after him now. Yeah, maybe he'll lead them right to where the others are now.
Where there are a lot of them. They'll carefully study the spot where he went. Meanwhile, another drone strikes Russian positions in a high-rise building. Our soldiers receive similar videos from enemy drones. When the Russians run out of ammo, they don't look for military targets. They destroy everything they see. They often deliberately hunt civilians.
The target was civilians. That is, they would take off. They'd find, say, some easily accessible car they could hit. It was 100% a civilian car. They destroyed it. The Kherson-Mykolaiv highway, they would post it on their public channels.
And if they can't find even a target like that, they might just hit an apartment. When possible, our soldiers destroy these drones. But they say the worst thing is to witness evil and realize that right now you can't help. Dozens of drone flights during a single shift.
It smashed the boat. When there were 3 KIA, I was actually rotating on the road. They made it up. They were rolling without a motor. It was a drone similar to the Pegasus, only it was a Viraj 8. And we had a black sun hanging above us.
Mykola is preparing the drone for the next flight. Is this a Ukrainian drone?
Yes, it's a Pegasus.
He's from Odessa and had never been to Kherson before the big war. He says he discovered this city for himself.
Constant shelling. People are always either without electricity or without water or without gas. The people here are very good, but for some reason everyone has forgotten about them. Nobody needs them. They're not even afraid of the shelling anymore. When we go into the courtyards here, they're just sitting outside and the shells come in. They've just gotten so used to it by now. I don't know how you can get used to something like that. No, they just say they're simply being wiped out. And nobody cares.
He joined the military after his father was killed during the occupation. He and his sister made the decision together.
She was the first. It was easier for her. I had to, while I was shutting down my business, while I was closing everything. By the time I got here, she was already a junior sergeant.
Alexander, a native of Kherson and a sailor, was at sea when the full-scale invasion began.
He was at sea when it all started. I came back reunited with my family. Spent a little time under occupation. I took my family to Poland. We stayed there, realized that we lived there for half a year, and I understood that it wasn't for us. We came back. My family is in Odessa, and I myself have already come here.
Now, when he flies his drone over the left bank, he sees the ruins of his childhood.
We spent our whole childhood on the river, in nature. Now we see that everything is destroyed.
And it is precisely so that life can return to the destroyed towns and villages that he and his comrades risk their lives every minute. Kherson Shkina, Olha Chitailo and Volodymyr Kovalenko. Fact ICTV. United News.
President Volodymyr Zelensky held a meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's staff. The key issue was energy, in particular the restoration of communities after Russian strikes and the expansion of reserves of energy equipment, details in this report. In the evening address. Please.
Dear Ukrainians, a brief update on today. Today, I held a staff meeting. Much of it was about energy, restoration in the regions, deployed headquarters, and the need for reserves and equipment. This week will be very active in terms of diplomacy. There are several tasks specifically regarding the necessary equipment for repairs and for generation. Clear tasks for our diplomats. We are also working on gas, ensuring sufficient volume for the heating season. I want to thank every repair crew. I want to thank all Ukrainian gas workers. Almost around the clock, our people are working for Ukraine to provide Ukrainians with gas. We have determined all the details regarding financing, what funds will be sufficient for gas procurement, and what possible sources of funding there may be. In fact, we have already secured half of these funds, and the government will find the entire necessary amount. The instructions have been given. Of course, there were military reports, including a detailed one on increasing the aviation component. There will be more combat capabilities for aviation to protect infrastructure. In particular, more helicopters. The Prime Minister was present at the briefing. Ukraine's Yulia Sviridenko also addressed energy issues. There are good agreements with Slovakia following the visit of Ukraine's Prime Minister. I am grateful for this. We are working on projects with America in the energy sector. There is significant interest from the United States of America in working with us on nuclear power generation, as well as in gas and oil. Ukrainian infrastructure can provide greater energy security for the entire region, and America is clearly interested in this. Overall, this is already part of a much larger Euro-Atlantic strategy. The energy market in Europe must be freed not just from dependence on Russian energy resources, but from the very fact of their supply. Russia builds its policy on European foundations and tries to break Europe. This absolutely must not be financed at Europe's expense. Nowhere else in the world will Putin earn as much money as he did in Europe before this war. And unfortunately, he is still earning it. Europe will continue to restrict this. We are also working with our partners on new ones. Sanctions against Russia. There will be many negotiations on sanctions this week. I thank everyone who is helping. Today, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Denis Shmyhal, also reported. And first and foremost, about the results of Ramstein and new agreements with our partners. There will be additional support packages. Separately, in a very focused way, we are working with our partners so that Ukraine can still receive the necessary number of Patriot systems. This is not an easy task, but it is one of the security guarantees for Ukraine. And it will work in the long term. In Washington, I spoke with U.S. defense companies that produce both Patriot systems and other weapons we need. The willingness to work with Ukraine is more than sufficient. Ukraine is trusted. Trust is important so that at the political level in Washington, there was enough support for this. One more thing. I spoke with President Macron, in particular about the current diplomatic prospects. We need to keep putting pressure on Russia. Now is the right moment. And pressure can open up new prospects. I spoke with the Prime Minister of Denmark. Our cooperation with Denmark is very substantial, and this concerns defense, production, and other forms of support for Ukraine. We greatly appreciate the political support, especially now as Denmark is presiding over the European Union. This helps us strengthen our positions. We are preparing joint European decisions that will help. We are counting on a productive week. Glory to Ukraine.
Trump denies that he allegedly urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to give Donbas to Russia. The American president calls to stop at the current front lines and says that the occupied territories should be left as they are and negotiated over later. President Zelensky and European leaders are united. No pressure on Ukraine regarding its territories and no concessions to the aggressor. Instead, what is needed is clear and consistent pressure on Moscow.
The American leader did not force the president of Ukraine to agree to hand over the occupied Donbas to Russia. Aboard his plane, Donald Trump stated that this issue was not even discussed. He once again insists that his only goal is to stop the killings. Therefore, he insists only on stopping the war where it is currently ongoing. That is, along the current front line.
We never discussed this. We believe that they should simply stop at the lines where the fighting is currently taking place. There is a front line and everything else is very difficult to agree upon. If you start talking about it, you take this, we take that. There are so many different options. That's why I say, just stop right now at the front lines, go home, and stop killing people. As for Donbas, let everything remain as it is. And then maybe something can be agreed upon later.
The information about Trump's alleged demand to give up Donbas was made public by the Financial Times. Allegedly, this was discussed at the recent talks between the presidents of America and Ukraine at the White House last week. Volodymyr Zelensky notes that Ukraine, together with its partners, has come closer to the possibility of ending the war. And Trump's efforts are contributing to this. However, the president remains steadfast. There will be no territorial concessions to the occupier. That is why he calls on the world to jointly put pressure on Russia.
Right now, I am communicating with leaders almost every day to ensure that we have a united position across Europe regarding pressure on Russia. The right kind of pressure. We will not give the aggressor anything as a gift. Nothing to them. We will not forget. We can clearly see that this Russia is a long-term threat.
European leaders are categorical, and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk emphasizes that no one has the right to pressure Ukraine regarding its territory. And instead of demanding compromises from Kiev, the world should put pressure on Moscow to make it stop its aggression. The Polish Prime Minister also adds that no concessions can lead to a just and lasting peace. Ukraine remains the main defender of Europe against Russian aggression, emphasizes German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He is convinced that the war could end as soon as tomorrow if the country surrenders. But that would mean the beginning of new aggression, this time against Europe.
Russia has not come to terms with how the world has changed. Even Putin has said that the greatest catastrophe for Russia was the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. That is Putin's opinion. From this, he concludes that power and the military should determine policy. He acts aggressively not only against Ukraine but also against many European countries, so we will once again have to defend ourselves.
The Pope has once again called for a ceasefire in Ukraine. During Sunday Mass at St. Peter's Square, Leo XIV emphasized that the instruments of war must give way to the instruments of peace. The ceasefire must be immediate and effective, and the peace to be established should be lasting and just.
We believe that the Virgin Mary and the new saints will hear our constant prayers for peace in the Holy Land, in Ukraine, and in other places affected by war. May God grant all those responsible the wisdom and perseverance to seek paths toward a just and lasting peace.
Trump's team is determined to continue on the path to peace in Ukraine, no matter how long it takes, assures U.S. Vice President J. Divins. However, there is no specific timeline for achieving peace, nor is there a decision regarding the tomahawks that Ukraine is waiting for. Vance explains that Trump has heard Kyiv's request, but the United States must first take care of its own security.
We critically need weapons for our own troops. That is exactly what the president is focused on. And as with all the decisions he has made regarding Russia and Ukraine, he is trying to bring peace because he believes it is in America's best interest. The president has undoubtedly heard the requests from Ukrainians. We know what they want, but the decision to provide tomahawks to Ukraine has not yet been made.
Moscow, as always, demonstratively brushed it off. The Kremlin categorically stated that they will not cease hostilities, as proposed by the American president. The spokesperson for the Russian dictator Peskov emphasized that Moscow's position on the war remains unchanged. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio may meet with the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov, as early as this Thursday. The location of the meeting has not yet been determined. However, it is known for certain that the talks between Trump and Putin will take place in Budapest, which has greatly angered Europeans, since the fate of Europe is essentially being decided without the heads of the European Union and the leaders of major countries, but instead with the mediation of Putin's friend and the Hungarian Prime Minister, Orbán. They also recall the fate of the infamous Budapest Memorandum, under which Ukraine gave up the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, but in return received no security guarantees. And Russia, as one of the guarantor states, itself and cynically, broke its promise regarding the inviolability of Ukraine's borders and sovereignty. Veronica Boyko, Fakti, ICTV, Marathon, United News.
Ukraine will receive a reparations loan from the European Union within the next few weeks, assured French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot. The funds should be enough to cover defense for at least 3 years. Barrot noted that the loan will allow Ukraine to arm itself for defense, including, of course, with European weapons. The loan is planned to be repaid using reparations that Russia is to pay to Ukraine. The head of the French Foreign Ministry noted that Putin's regime is suffering military, political, and economic failure. In 1,000 days, he has managed to capture only 1% of Ukraine's territory.
Russia's economy is in agony, exhausted by the costs of the war in Ukraine, Ukrainian strikes that have destroyed a fifth of Russia's oil refining capacity, as well as by sanctions. Putin is interested in reaching an agreement on an immediate ceasefire because time is not on his side. We will provide Ukraine with the means for self-defense for at least 3 years, thanks to a loan that the European Commission will grant to Ukraine.
Today, the EU Council also adopted a plan for a complete phase-out of Russian gas by 2028. Only 2 countries opposed it. As usual, these were Hungary and Slovakia. The document legally obliges a phased ban on imports. This includes both pipeline and liquefied gas from Russia. New supplies will be prohibited starting from January 1st, 2026. The EU is discussing a special model of enlargement under which new EU members would not have full voting rights at first, according to Politico citing sources. The discussions are still informal. It is expected that if adopted, this model will remain in effect until a large-scale EU reform is carried out, which would make it more difficult to abuse the right of veto. Such a model of newcomers without voting rights could neutralize the position of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who is categorically opposed to Ukraine's accession to the EU. Meanwhile, the European Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, reported that the European Union is ready to start negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova on accession despite Hungary's veto. However, the European Commission is urging the Hungarian side to participate in the first cluster of negotiations to discuss issues related to minority rights. Marta Kos informed that the EU has completed its review of Ukrainian legislation, and by November, all 6 clusters may be opened, after which everything should be ready to accelerate reforms. It is important to eliminate corruption and strengthen institutions, especially the rule of law, the official emphasized.
We are exploring all opportunities that will allow us to move forward, and we always emphasize that our principles are based on achievements. Both Moldova and Ukraine are aware of this. And at one time, Hungary did not object to granting Ukraine candidate status for EU membership. So I hope that now too, Hungary will support the opening of the first negotiation cluster.